Hey guys, today we are doing a ranking for Warcraft 3 units. Now this will be based on my own personal experience with these units, and it'll be based on 1.26, so it will be like based on the modern Warcraft 3 units, so yeah. Now obviously it's going to be subjective and it's going to be based on my experiences, not on the meta, so don't use this as a meta guide. Use this as a guide from my personal experiences, not as a meta guide, because it's not going to be based on meta. Just making that clear before people start getting like, oh no, this unit's better, you just don't know how to use it. Like, just this is from my personal experience and what I personally think about the units. So yeah, let's begin. Abominations are going into D tier because I don't think that they're any good as a tier 3 melee unit. I think they're cool in the design, I really do like them as like a design, but in terms of utility they're just not very good. They have flesh armor and they're very slow at moving and they're very slow at attacking. You need to use like necromancers to buff them to make them useful, and it's just not worth it. Like, melee units are useless as it is in Warcraft 3, let alone having slow shitty units like Abominations. Archers are the best starting unit in the game, in my opinion, because they have range on their side and they're very flexible. And they only cost 2 food, so yeah, they're pretty good. Plus they can transition into Hippo Riders later, so I think Archers are pretty good, B tier definitely. Banshees, the biggest problem with Banshees, and the reason why I put it D, I put it higher than Abominations, is simply because of the mana that they take. Like, they use a lot of mana, and while they do have some interesting abilities like Anti-Magic Shell, actually getting them enough mana to use Anti-Magic Shell is a bit of a pain in the neck, and Curse isn't really all that great in my opinion. So yeah, it's just not worth making them in my opinion. Cano's S tier, best units in the game, one of the best units in the game. Like, Cano's just dominate, they just destroy everything on the ground in seconds with splash damage and magic, unless it's like spell immune, but they're just devastating. They can kill heroes and they basically destroy buildings in seconds. Like, they're just so OP. Another unit that's going to get S tier is Crypt Fiends. They are a must for any undead army because they're very flexible, and they can also burrow, they can web enemies that are in the air, so that gives them a bit of anti-air utility, and they've got a nice health pool at the start. So yeah, they're pretty damn good. Demolishers, I put them at D. I don't think they're the worst siege unit, but they're not really that important. I'm not going to waste time making these unless the enemy's stupid enough to mass towers. I'm just not making this unit. Destroyers, I'm going to put them at B. I mean, the thing about Destroyers is that they are very much a situational unit. They can be handy, they have spell immunity, and they can kind of like use anti-spellcaster moves, but you need to kind of micro that, and it's like, yeah, like, having an extra rare unit's nice, but it's just like, yeah, you have to micro it. The only reason why I would get Destroyers is if a statue is low on health, and then I have to basically get the statue into a destroyer. I mean, I'm sure that more skilled players would probably put this higher to an A tier, but personally it's just too much for me to micro, and yeah, Devour Magic and all that, it's just too much work. But I still see the potential in this unit, so I give it a B. Dragon Horse I'm going to put in C because I don't think they're enough to be good anti-air. They're not really brilliant at like dealing damage. They do have the ability to use Cloud, which can be handy against towers, but that's about it really. Like, it's basically like a anti-air unit that's good for dealing with people that only mass like chimes and stuff, but usually they have hippogriffs with them, and hippogriffs will just tear them to shreds. Druids of the Claw, I'm actually probably going to put these in A. I think Druids of the Claw are really flexible. Rejuvenation's a really good move, really underappreciated, plus they have Roar, so they've got buff and they've got a healing ability, which can be used to heal heroes, and your teammate's hero if you're playing in a team game. So yeah, I'm gonna make this clear, I'm mostly basing this on 4 versus 4, more than anything, not 1 versus 1, because 1 versus 1 you use a lot more different units, and I prefer team games anyways because they're less macro they require less micro, and I'm a bit shit at this game. Druids of the Talon, I'm going to put in C. They aren't bad, but as I say, they're mostly about support and they can't really do much on their own. They're only mainly good at using Cyclone and like Fairy Fire to like detect like invisible enemies and just see what's going on around the map, which can be nice. They're really handy for that, but like you need something else with them really. Dryads A tier, definitely. I probably pull them high just simply because they're spell immune and they have slow poison. Like, so they slow them down. Their range, which gives them some anti-air potential, and yeah, their spell, slow poison slows them down. Fairy Dragons, I'm putting them at D. I just don't see the point in making them. Like, when you can make these two units, like, why make Fairy Dragons? Like, they're too situational. They're like, I mean, it's like the Destroyer, I can see more potential in than the Fairy Dragons. Fairy Dragons are just, like, kind of there. And I'm just not keen on them. Like, it's like, you have, like, a move that can hit enemies when they're using moves, but if you have Fairy Dragons out, players are going to adapt to that, aren't they? So, yeah, it's going to be like, they're only useful if the enemy has spellcasters and relies on spellcasters, so, yeah. I'm just not keen on them, personally. Flying Machines, I am tempted to put them in S, but I also realise that they're not the best anti-air out there. I'm going to put them at a high A though, because you can do a lot with Flying Machines. They're really, really good in terms of flexibility and what you can do in a team game. Like, if you mass, like, Flying Machines, you can absolutely overwhelm enemies. It's crazy. Footmen, I'm going to put at C. They're only there for, like, creeping, and that's about it. Frostworms, S tier, arguably one of the best units in the game, without a doubt. Like, they can slow enemies, you got the magic damage and the splash. It's like, not as powerful as the Chimeras, but they're more flexible because they can attack air, and instead of like additional damage splash, they mainly have like the slow splash, so it's kind of like having like a Frost Nova that constantly rain down on enemies with every hit, which is pretty damn powerful. And yeah, like, they're pretty good units in general because they've got a lot of health and they're really beefed up, so you can't go wrong with them, especially when you combine them with beams. Gargoyles though, like, I'd like to put them high, but unfortunately I can't. I mean, I'd probably put them at C. I just see them as like, they're not the best melee anti-air unit in the game, again, and there's just better alternatives for undead. I mean, maybe I'll put them in B just simply because you can use them with ghouls if you're going to do like a 1v1, and I probably will put them at B for that reason. They still are useful. I think C is a bit too harsh. I'm going to put them at B because you can really do some damage with Gargs if the situation calls for it, but it's just like, overall these are better, like just way better. Ghouls, I'm probably putting them at high C. Like, they die too quickly, but they do harvest materials, so they're more useful than the footmen in general. Personally, in my opinion, I think that they're better because of that. But yeah, other than that, C. Glyphor, the worst unit in the game, hands down. Fight me. They are just terrible in every single way, and just probably shouldn't be in the game. Grunts are pretty damn good. They cost more food than the footmen, but they have a bit more longevity. But the thing about it is that once you hit tier 2, they kind of become a little bit more obsolete, but they do still keep the pillage ability, so you can still steal resources from buildings, which is something that's handy, so you can still carry them over into tier 2, it's just that they're not going to last in like huge tier 3 games. So I'm putting them above footmen, but I'm not putting them any higher, just simply because they are still fundamentally a tier 1 unit. And while it is the best tier 1 melee unit, actually, well, they do harvest lumber, that's the one thing, but like in terms of fighting they are the best, but like tier 1 melee unit, but I'm putting them at C just simply because they are tier 1 and there's a cap on the potential of tier 1, so yeah. But I still think they're the best of the tier 1 melee units. Right, so next we have Griffins. Now, I think Griffins are very powerful, but I don't really like going Griffins as human. because I'd rather go with Siege, but I still think that Griffins are really powerful, like, in terms of area, because they have the, like, magic damage. But then again, you have spell immune enemies that are affected by that, but I still think that they're pretty useful, just not the best. I'd probably put them at A, but they're not an S tier in my opinion. Headhunters, I think on their own they're not brilliant, but they can work with support units. I will put them at B. Probably, I need to put them at, like, Archer at low B, because it's not really as good, because this is a good one. When they become Berserkers, they become better, but they aren't the best at, like, being on their own, but when they're with support units, they can be good distractions from the support. Like, they blend in well, and they can deal some decent damage. I think they're a pretty decent unit, and they're pretty cheap. I don't think they're the best, but I don't think they're the worst. Hippogriffs, S tier, easy. Just easy S tier, because they just tear air units to shreds. They're the best anti-air in the game, by far. Hippo Riders, A tier. They're better without archers mounted, although you can still use them for different things, particularly in tier 2. When you've got all your archers and you want to, like, carry them over, you just mount them on a hippogriff, and then they'll basically be a cheap air unit which you can use to harass people's peasants, from, like, going through the trees and harassing peasants and doing shit like that. They can be really annoying to deal with, but they're also easy to kill if you've got any form of anti-air, so bear that in mind. Huntresses, once again, C tier. I mean, they're better than footmen. Grunts, well, I don't know, like, that's a tricky one. It's really tricky to decide between these two, which one's better and which one's worse. This one has more health pool, but I just found that this one kind of lasts longer, and I think that is better damage potential, but this one is more AoE, and this one also has, like, the bird upgrade, where you can actually, like, see what's going on with Scout, whereas this just has Berserker upgrade, but this one has Pillage, so it's a tricky one, but I'm going to put them near each other, because that's kind of where they belong, because Huntresses become obsolete in tier 3, and possibly tier 2 as well. Knights, probably put them around the same area as Griffins. They've got nice armor, but, like, Griffins are just, like, better in my opinion, but I still think that they're one of the better melee units in the game by far. Kodos, I'm putting them at B tier. They give, like, a damage upgrade. The damage upgrade is enough to, like, warrant getting a bestiary just to go alongside these. And you have Devour, so it does have its uses. Meat Wagons, it's tied to undead melee, isn't it? I mean, not the worst siege weapon, but undead melee just sucks. Militia, same thing as Footmen. I'd probably put them higher than Footmen in a way, because, well, some builds you can just use Militia and, like, they always turn into peasants afterwards anyway, so they're actually more useful overall than Footmen, just simply for that alone, because they can actually harvest things. If you're going to count Militia as peasants, then I'm going to put them above. More teams, one of the best units in the game. Definitely S tier. I think this unit is the most underrated unit in Warcraft 3, because they can do so much. They can flare, so they can scout, but they can also siege enemies tactically, so you can really fuck enemies up with their, like, mortar shots and just, like, destroy their buildings before they can even react. And if you use them with Sorks, then you can use invisible morts. There's so many fun things you can do with mortar teams, and that's why they are S. Mountain Giants, I'm going to put them at C. I'm going to put them at high C, because they are pretty decent, but I just don't think that they are... I don't think that they are worth getting out, because, once again, they are a melee unit. They do have some siege potential, but they're not the best siege units. They do have, like, the taunt ability, but people can micro out of that. I mean, you might want to put them in. It's a bit like the Kodo, but I think the Kodo's got more going for it than the Mountain Giant. I mean, I'd rather just have an extra Druid of the Claw, because, like, Druid of the Claw can basically use Roar and Rejuvenate, whereas this can't. And, yeah, I think Druid of the Claw is better at dealing damage, whereas this isn't, unless it's buildings. Necromancers, I'm actually going to put these at C, because they are pretty decent caster units, but whether or not you can actually put them to good use, that ultimately depends on whether or not you're going melee build, and I don't usually think that undead melee is that good, personally. Statues, A tier, they're pretty much essential for any undead army because of the healing and the mana regen that you get from them. Like, it can really help, especially when you've got like nuking power and it can just keep you nuking, and if the enemy decides that they're going to use Demon Hunter against you, this is like your counter to that. And yeah, they are also spell immune, which is also very handy too. Priests, I don't think are the best caster unit for human. I really don't. I think Sorks are better, but they're okay, I guess. They can dispel, but other than that, I'm going to put them at C. I don't think that they're brilliant. Raiders, S tier, easy S tier. Like, Ensnare is just too good, and they also have Pillage, and they also have siege damage. Like, and they're only 180. Like, they're actually cheaper than mortar teams, believe it or not. Like, they are, and they have such great siege potential, it's unreal. But also they have Pillage. Like, damn, without a doubt the best unit for Orc, hands down. Like, just if you play Orc, get some Raiders out, get at least 1 or 2 out just for Ensnare, because it makes a huge difference. Like, 0 mana cost, it can affect spell immune enemies, and it just stops them in their place, so you can surround and then kill them, or like if they're trying to flee, you can stop them from fleeing with Ensnare. It's just so fucking good. You can also bring down air units as well. Very flexible unit. Definitely one of the most underrated units in the game by far. Riflemen, I'm going to put at B tier. I think that they last longer than most tier 1 units, as they can be used with casters, and they can be nice to have. They're decent anti-air as well, so that's something to consider. And they have long rifle upgrade, which means that they can hit from far away too. But they're not the most ideal unit to have late game, but they can still be somewhat useful. Siege engines, I'm going to put at A. Now, I would have put them at S if they moved faster, but ultimately I'm going to put them at high A because they're just like flying machines. Like, they just bombard everything and they're really good, but they're not as flexible as flying machines, so I'm putting them at A. Shades, they can't attack, but they can scout. I mean, you could argue that there's better scouting options, but this is the best scouting option because it can move around and do whatever the fuck it wants, you know? So yeah, I'd probably give this a B personally because it is useful, but at the same time it doesn't do any damage, so you got that in mind. Shaman, they are actually pretty good, but I won't put them at A tier just simply because I think that there's a better caster unit for Orc, but I do think that this one's still decent. Like, Lightning Shield is actually pretty handy at times, and obviously you have Bloodlust, which can be really handy when you've got certain units on the field. Sorceresses, like, once again, I'm going to put this at B. I'm going to put this higher than Shaman because they can polymorph and they can use invisibility and slow. All very useful abilities. The only problem with Sorceresses is that they use a lot of mana, just like the Banshee, but I can see more reasons to get a Sorceress out than a Banshee because their moves are really useful and you can do a lot of really great stuff with them. So yeah, B tier for that. Spellbreakers, I'm going to put them at B tier as well because they're spell immune. And they can steal magic, but I think the spell immunity is the biggest reason why you want them on the field. Just simply because it's another unit that won't be hit by the enemy's like magic. And that alone is good when you've got units like freaking Griffins and Chimes to worry about, as well as like Frostworms as well. Spirit Walkers, probably the worst of the Orc casters in my opinion. Like, but they're still handy. I mean, you've got Spirit Link, which like prevents, like, you can get him focus fired, which is always good because it shares the HP damage between units, which means that you're not going to have to deal with like those pesky focus firing guys. You also have Disenchant, but you have Purge with the Shaman, and if you have enough Shaman you can like multiple Purge, but yeah, like Disenchant is like an AoE version. It's basically the same thing as the Priest's Dispel, but I don't really see the point. I don't really see the need for a mass like Dispel like when you've got Purge, which seems to be enough, but I suppose that's something to take into account if you ever need it, but I never found that I need it. And the final one is only useful with Tauren, which is the next one, and honestly Tauren I don't think are really that good because of how hard it is to get them on the field. but I'm going to put them on A tier just simply because they are good, but they're the worst of the tier 3 melee units besides Abominations. Like, they aren't brilliant because they cost 5 food. You can get a third hero out for this. Why not get a third hero out instead? Because you can do more with a third hero than you can with a Tauren, and it's melee, and it's slow, and you need Bloodlust from the Shaman to be of use, and it takes so long to get them out on the field. You're better off getting Raiders, because Raiders can do more. Like, this is basically like the inferior option to Raiders. Just use Raiders instead, people. It might be not as powerful and not have Pulverize like the Tauren has, but it costs less food and it's more flexible and it's just better. But, in fact, no, I'm going to put this at B just simply for that, because why? Why would you use Tauren over Raiders? You just wouldn't. It's just too much food cost to actually use them, but they are decent if you do get them out. They are the highest A tier. I can't put them at S because they're suicidal, but they are probably, outside of Raiders, they are the best unit for Orc, and they are the units you're going to rely on if you're playing like a team game with Orc, because like particularly in a 4 vs 4 you will be using bats, because there'll be so much fucking air that you'll want to just blow it all up, and it also sieges buildings like the fly machine, so very useful unit. Witch Doctors, A rank, definitely. Best caster unit for Orc because they're really good at crowd control with Stasis Ward, they can put healing wards down, and they also put sentry wards down. 3 very useful spells, all of them are useful 100% of the time. There's never a time where Witch Doctors aren't useful, honestly. They are just the best casters in the game, in my opinion. I think that they are, because they're always useful. Those wards are always useful. The only downside to Witch Doctors is, well, Spellbreakers and Destroyers can kind of take advantage of that, but the thing about it is that a lot of their wards are invisible anyways, so yeah. And that scouting potential and that stasis trap is just so fucking good on top of the healing ward. You'd be surprised how good this unit really is. It's really good. And finally, Wyverns. As we all know, Orcs love to fast tech to Wyverns. I'm putting it at low A just simply because it's an early cheap air unit you can get that's pretty damn good in terms of dealing damage, but they're also pretty easy to kill. I think it's worth getting A just simply because of how fast you can get them out on the field. But besides that, like, they're not the best air unit in the game. They do kind of like become obsolete to a degree, and that's kind of the biggest problem with Orc, because it's like one of the few air units that they have. They have this and this, and once this becomes obsolete, it becomes very hard for Orc players in 4 vs 4 games. They usually have to transition to this because there's just so much air. But this can still be useful, it's just the worst of the bunch. Like, even Hippo Riders are better, in my opinion, because they just get better upgrades. Like, this one just gets a poison upgrade that isn't slow poison like the Dryads. So, yeah. But anyways, that's my tier list for Warcraft 3 units. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you all next time.